Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. The New Stack thanks the Code team for sponsoring our podcast from KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con in Austin, Texas. Learn more about the open source projects Code is supporting and its team of passionate open source engineers and advocates building community through contribution and engagement in emerging technologies. Learn more about Code at thecodeteam.com. Hey guys, how are ya?
Hello.
Hello.
We are deep into the conference. Michelle, how you faring?
Oh, I'm still running off the adrenaline and energy from everybody around me. Tomorrow I'll probably crash.
Well, Michelle, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone just so you can know who you are, and I'm sure they know you already, but...
Yeah, so I'm Michelle. I am co-chairing this conference. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. I work on the Azure Containers team. I'm also very, very heavily involved in the Kubernetes world with SIG apps, and I'm on the steering committee now. So all Kubernetes all the time.
Yeah,
that's me.
Nice. Matt.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Matt's a podcaster. I just learned that he's been doing podcasts for years, and now you do one on Cloud Native.
Yep, the Cloud Native podcast.
Awesome. So Matt, tell us about yourself.
So my name's Matt Farina. I work at Samsung SDS, and I'm a software engineer there, and I spend most of my time working on upstream Kubernetes. And I spend time doing things for SIG apps and its related projects, but I also get involved in the other SIGs like SIG architecture, lately SIG CLI, and just trying to generally help the project along because we use Kubernetes.
Why do you like the SIG so much? What is it about them that you really enjoy?
About the SIGs?
Yeah, I like working with the SIGs.
Working with the SIGs I like because it brings the people aspect to it. So often when you work in open source, it's about code and pull requests and issues. But when you get the SIGs together, you've organized around an important topic area, and you bring people together for meetings every week where you can talk through issues, get to know other people with the same concerns and same interests who are working the same stuff. And it's more than just code. It brings in that people element.
Michelle, how long have you been, so you guys have both been engineers for a while, right? So has SIGs always been part of your career? Have they always been something you've been involved in?
No, this is the first time actually that I've been involved in SIGs. Not a lot of communities use this particular method from what I've heard. Some do, which is really cool, but not at this scale. So it's just been really interesting to not only learn about special interest groups, which is new to me, but also learn about special interest groups and how they function at this scale, and kind of learning with everybody else on that.
What do you like about them that you think they bring to your own work?
I think it's the perspectives, right? I've believed for a very long time that perspective is power, and it's really nice to have not just your company's perspective or your personal perspective, but also another organization's perspective on challenges or concerns around a tool that you're both using. So I think that's really cool, and I think it can allow for more robust solutions to problems. So I like that. Yeah.
It provides a context, doesn't it? I mean, it provides that perspective, like you're saying, that you may not get if you're just working again, like even in a small team internally, right?
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. Right. Because you work for Samsung, right? In
That's
the
right.
SDS group, right?
Yeah.
And you're at Microsoft, right? And in the Samsung group, what does the Samsung SDS group focus on?
So in Samsung SDS, I'm part of the cloud native computing team, and we focus on bringing cloud native technologies to other parts of Samsung so they can use these technologies, and to others who are outside of Samsung. And so we focus on enabling bringing cloud native to organizations, in particular enterprises.
Okay. So here, I mean, a good example. I mean, your paths would not normally cross, would they?
No.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah. So Michelle, you started the App SIG inside the Kubernetes ecosystem. When did you start that?
So both Matt and I started it.
Oh, you both started
yeah,
it. Okay.
Yeah. That was, I think, May of last year. So it's been around a year and a half. And we actually didn't know each other when we started this SIG. We had a mutual colleague, and we both just were concerned about the same problems. And so the colleague had connected us, and we started talking about it. And there were SIG apps.
What were the problems that you were concerned about?
So we really wanted to represent app developers and app operators. And so much of Kubernetes is focused on operating Kubernetes and building Kubernetes, things like SIG storage or SIG networking, which are dealing with the low-level details. But once you have Kubernetes, then you need to run apps in it. And how does that work? What does that look like? And we wanted to make sure that that was represented well, because that's what we do, and we wanted to make sure their voice was heard and their problems were being attacked and dealt with, and solutions were being created and shared to solve problems at that other layer of the stack that's so often overlooked.
Yeah.
But that covers. So, for example, what would that be? Like, what were some of these problems that were being overlooked?
Yeah. So. Running applications in Kubernetes means a few different things, right? Like, you're interacting with the workloads API in Kubernetes, so deployments, replica sets, daemon sets, there's a stateful sets. All these controllers in Kubernetes are part of the workloads API, and we both, wanted a place to kind of talk about those concepts and best practices around using those tools, and also we wanted a place to give feedback on those things too. So the developers on this, on the workloads team will come to SIG apps, and we wanted a place to just basically converse with them. They come to the SIG apps now, they didn't before, but after we created this, there was a place to communicate and have a feedback loop. The other part of it is when you're developing apps and managing apps on Kubernetes, you may use tools on top of Kubernetes to make the workflow a little bit easier and more assimilated to your current workflow. And so we wanted a place to talk about that kind of tooling as well.
Yeah, and to go beyond that, I mean, one of the things that you brought in was there are a lot of tools and a lot of people trying to figure out, how do I run my applications in Kubernetes? What are the best practices? What tools? Where are the problems at? And what we saw was a lot of different tools being created, and sometimes different people from different organizations would try to create a similar or the same tool. And so you brought in this idea of bringing demos in and start to showcase those, introduce people to each other. They're all recorded, and so other people can go online and see these demos, find out what people are doing, and start to learn about projects that are being used to help people run apps here, so we can leverage each other's work, meet and collaborate, and kind of bring that next higher level element of collaboration around Kubernetes together. Yeah,
so that was really popular. That became so popular. Every meeting in SIG apps for at least the first year had 2 to 3 demos, 5 to 10 minute demos. Because the space was growing so much and everybody was building their own tools. And so it was nice to come to this place and record the demo, because then you can share that across the community as well. So it's a key thing that came out.
So the tooling, where did you see the tension points that people were having with to this tooling that you were seeing as was really needed to help, use on top of Kubernetes to get the full, to be able to get that full sense of the environment itself?
Well, I mean, one area is the Kubernetes config files. They're very long and verbose. And if you're an app developer, an app operator, you might come from something like Heroku, or you come from Cloud Foundry, and you come from environments where you can describe what you need in a much smaller amount of space, quite frankly. And so we've seen kind of an explosion of tools designed to help that. Helm is used for that, which is a Kubernetes project, but then there's projects like Kedge and SciCube and other projects that are all trying to say, how do we make this experience easier so operators don't have to learn as much and don't have to know as much, but can still leverage as much power as they can. And we've seen over time an evolution of this space as people say, oh look, now I can bring in not just configuration for my infrastructure, but I can tie feature configuration into this as well. And we're starting to see more interesting things happen here where your configuration is simplified and you're changing it up to be more philosophically around the apps than the infrastructure. And so we've seen kind of an evolution in this space, and you see people collaborating with each other, talking about the different projects. We've had demos, and it's led to higher level thinking and just some interesting stuff in the space.
I'd say so. So you started doing these demos. I think we talked about that, and when I was chatting with you in Reno after the Open Source Leadership Summit.
Yeah.
And you were saying how fun it is, actually, because people are getting online and you get to see them kind of in a different environment, and thare showing you the different tools. Are you guys still doing that?
Yeah, we do. We have 1 to 2 demo slots every week. SIG Apps happens every single week.
Nice.
And we're still seeing new tools. And actually, we're also seeing tools that have been shown before, but if someone has an update that they want to show off or some problem that they solve, they'll come back and redo a demo.
Okay.
And so it's a way for the community to follow along in progress.
Yeah, and in fact, I would say that, we don't really have too much trouble getting demos because there's so much going on. Right now, I think we're mostly planned through demos well into January at this point, because we've got people who want to show off their stuff.
Yeah, there's also this. We consider changing the times for Asia Pacific time zones, and the feedback that we got originally was that people in those places didn't necessarily want to come to the meetings because there was a language barrier, so they liked watching the recordings and reading the notes. So we became more meticulous about that. But now we're actually getting requests from people in China and Australia saying they want to interact with SIG Apps, they want to come do demos and give feedback. So that's a really interesting thing that's happened too.
That is the power of just like sharing ideas.
Yeah.
So so you've come a long way with SIG Apps. Where are you now, and where do you want to take it? And what's the continuing story?
So right now, SIG Apps has the Workloads API, Helm, Charts, a project called Compose, and a certain number of things where we're enabling the ecosystem of all of these things underneath it. And so there's something going on called the App Def Working Group, which is the Application Definition Working Group. That's happening between us and SIG CLI, and there's some SIG architecture people involved. And we're trying to figure out where are the next pain points and what can we do next to try to help the community come together with some more common solutions. Maybe they're happening in the ecosystem, and we now want to start pulling some of that into Kubernetes so you can have some more common standards. And so we're looking at what can we do there. And so some of the things we're starting to tease out and look into are things like common labels. Right? So you can have common labels on your applications so that maybe user interfaces can start to pick that up and do some interesting, work and bring linkages between stuff. We're starting to look at things like that might happen. And right now I would say we're kind of in an exploratory phase where we're trying to figure out what are the problems and pain points, application operators are having, so we can start to look at what solutions do they need next.
We've also reached stability in terms of the core workloads API with the Kubernetes 1.9 release. So all of the workloads features are under apps/v1, and I think that's a pretty great milestone. So I think going forward, one of the areas of focus for SIG Apps will be, make sure we have that stability, backwards compatibility. We can do more around testing and that kind of thing. So that'll be really cool to see. And on just another point, we have 2 new SIG Apps co-leads, which I'm really excited about. They're Adnan Abdul Hussain from Bitnami and Kenneth Owens from Google. Kenneth leads the workloads team under Google GKE, and Adnan has been leading the charts team. And they both come from different backgrounds, and so them and Matt can come together, and it's more fresh blood. So it's a great time to get involved, because there's going to be kind of a new era in SIG Apps.
What are you moving on to do?
I'm going to focus more on the steering committee. There's some things that we've been talking about around frameworks for SIGs. How do we help SIGs more? How do we define that structure a little bit more? We're going to be focusing on creating a code of conduct committee. We're figuring out what to do with Kubernetes incubator projects. The current system doesn't work for everyone, so we're in very heavy discussions on what that should and may look like. So there's a lot more to come on that. And there's a lot of work to be done there. So I'm definitely going to be focusing a lot more in that.
Great. Well, we're just about out of time, but I want to thank you both for taking some time to talk a little bit about SIG apps and, in the direction for the group. And good luck on the steering committee, Michelle. And,
thank you.
And I'm going to definitely take a listen to the Cloud Native podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us today.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
The NewStack thanks the Code team for sponsoring our podcast from KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con in Austin, Texas. Learn more about the open source projects Code is supporting and its team of passionate open source engineers and advocates building community through contribution and engagement in emerging technologies. Learn more about Code at thecodeteam.com. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.